There's something about the ocean that doesn't sit right with me. I couldn't tell you why. I've never had a bad experience. Never nearly drowned. Never been caught in a riptide. But even when I was a kid, building sandcastles with sunscreen on my nose and salt in my hair, something about the horizon always felt too empty, too wide, like the ocean was waiting for something. But I never said it out loud, especially not this weekend. It was supposed to be the trip, the last real one before we all split off into separate lives. College, jobs, new cities. This was our goodbye, whether we said it that way or not. A few days of beach, booze, and forgetting we were about to grow up. There were 6 of us. Sarah was the one who got things done. She found the cabin online. It was one of those off-the-grid spots with no reviews, no phone number, just an email and a rustic charm description that turned out to mean no plumbing. Her little brother Josh tagged along too. He was 16, annoying, always trying to prove he was older than he was. But the rest of us didn't mind. He was like a little brother to all of us by now. Katie and Marcus were the couple, always holding hands, always whispering to each other, always trying to hide the fact they were arguing half the time. Still, they fit, like puzzle pieces that didn't want to admit they had sharp edges. Danny was our wild card, unfiltered, unpredictable, either the life of the party or the reason the party got shut down. And I had known him the longest, since 2nd grade. He used to eat glue. Now he just drinks too much and talks about getting a sleeve tattoo he will never afford. And finally, there's me, Nick, the guy behind the camera, even when there isn't one. I like to watch more than I talk. People fill in the silence for you if you wait long enough. And I have learned more about my friends that way than they probably realize. We took Sarah's SUV and a beat-up old camping trailer Danny borrowed from his cousin. The drive down the coast took most of the day. Towns got smaller, trees got thicker, and the cell signal dropped until we were off the grid in every sense of the word. The cabin itself wasn't much, just 4 walls, 2 rooms, and a porch that creaked like it had arthritis. The beach was a few hundred yards past the tree line, a long narrow strip of sand with no docks, no lifeguard stands, and no signs. Just the sea and the sky and the sound of waves that never seemed to stop. It felt forgotten, like we had stumbled onto something the world wasn't using anymore. Anyway, we set up camp, dragged coolers onto the porch, cracked open our first drinks before the sun even finished setting. The sky turned orange, then violet, then a deep oily black. Stars came out like pinholes in fabric. No city glow, no traffic noise, just wind and water and fire. Danny lit a bonfire right on the sand. Josh ran into the surf, hollering like a maniac. Katie laid out towels and pulled out a portable speaker that only worked half the time. Sarah unpacked food she had meticulously labeled in Ziploc bags. and I took pictures. Not with a camera, just with my mind. That first night was full of laughter. We passed a bottle of something sweet and cheap in a circle, and played stupid games we all pretended we were too old for. Truth or dare, would you rather, and most likely to. At one point, someone, maybe Katie, brought up local legends, because there's always one. Danny swore he had heard something about a ghost ship that washed ashore here 100 years ago. Its crew vanished without a trace. Josh claimed he saw something move in the water, a shape too big to be a fish. We all laughed it off, drunk stories, firelight fears. But when the fire burned down to embers and the ocean got louder, the fun started to feel thin. Like we were pretending to be relaxed. Like we wanted to be distracted. Because we were all starting to feel it, even if we didn't say it yet. Something about the place wasn't right. The next morning, I went down to the water before anyone else woke up. The sky was low and grey, the air thick with that metallic smell the sea gets before a storm. The waves were small, but there was something strange about the way they moved. Like they were pulling in a different direction, like the ocean didn't know what it wanted. I walked along the shoreline for a while, found a jellyfish the size of a dinner plate. It was bloated and pulsing, half buried in the sand. Its body was translucent, but something inside it looked dark. I didn't get too close. Further down, I found an old piece of driftwood lodged in the sand. Except it wasn't driftwood. It was carved, crudely, like it had been whittled with a knife. The shape was vaguely human. Its arms too long, no face, just a smooth oval head and pointed fingers. I turned it over with my shoe, then left it where I found it. Back at the cabin, Sarah was pacing. The radio wasn't picking up anything, and her phone wouldn't turn on. Not just no signal, no power. It had worked the night before. Josh swore he heard something moving in the trees behind the cabin. Could have been a deer, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Katie said she saw lights out on the water, like lanterns bobbing just beneath the surface. Danny told her it was just the moon reflecting off the waves. Except it wasn't night. By that second night, the mood had shifted. We still joked, still ate marshmallows and played music, and dared each other to run into the water naked. But the energy had changed. It felt forced, like we were trying to laugh louder than whatever was creeping in at the edges. The ocean sounded different, not louder, just closer. And that night, I sat up by the fire after the other ones went to bed. The wind had died, but the air still moved in a way that felt wrong, like breath on the back of my neck. The surf was black and endless, and I thought I saw something out there. Something tall and still, just past where the waves broke. I blinked and it was gone. Or maybe it had just lowered itself back in. We all decided to leave the next morning. Sarah wanted to go at dawn. She didn't say why, but her eyes gave it away. She hadn't slept at all. None of us had. At least, not really. We kept hearing things. Low thumps outside the cabin. A splash when no one was near the water. Josh even swore he heard voices. Not shouting, whispers from the trees or the sea. We all packed up fast, but the van refused to start. The battery was dead. Sarah popped the hood and cursed. Josh suggested we hike back to the main road, but none of us remembered how far it actually was. We hadn't been paying attention on the way in. We were laughing, drinking, talking about nothing at all. And now the forest behind us felt like it was leaning in, pressing closer. So we stayed. One more night. The afternoon was colder than the others. The wind of the water had a bite to it. Clouds smeared across the sky like bruises. I kept catching the others staring at the horizon like they expected something to rise out of it. I at least tried to play normal. Took a walk down the beach with Danny. He was quiet for once. No jokes, no stories. Just him kicking rocks into the surf. Does it feel loud to you? He asked me. What do you mean? The water. It's louder than it should be. He paused. Like it's talking to me. I didn't answer. I just looked out at the sea. There was a shape out there again. Same place as before. It was long, dark and still. Danny saw it too. We didn't say a word, just turned and walked back to the cabin. That evening, Josh disappeared. 1 minute he was poking the fire, complaining about being hungry, and the next, he was gone. We searched the beach, the woods, even the shallow pools near the rocks. We all shouted until our throats were raw. But the ocean didn't give him back. His footprints led down to the beach and ended. They just stopped mid-strike, like he'd stepped into air. We stood there in the dying light, listening to the surf suck at the shore. The wind had stopped completely. It felt like the world held its breath. After a while, Katie started to cry. Sarah just stared out at the water. I heard her whisper something under her breath. It's not done with us yet. That night, no one slept. We all ended up in the cabin, huddled around the lantern, barely speaking. And every so often, someone would look at the window and then quickly look away. The waves were louder than ever and closer. It felt like they were coming up the beach inch by inch, like the sea was creeping toward us, reaching and searching for something. At some point, Katie started mumbling. At first we thought she was asleep, talking in her dreams, but her eyes were wide open, glossy. They are in the water, she said, her voice distant. "They are below. They are waiting." "Who?" Sarah asked. But Katie didn't answer. She just stared through the walls. Later that night, I walked out alone. I don't really know why. Something pulled at me, quiet and patient, like a rope tied to my chest. The beach was silver in the moonlight, the ocean flat and black, and out where the horizon should have been, where sky and sea should have met, there was something rising. Tall, thin, pale, like a tower made of bones, like a spire of driftwood and flesh, wrapped in seaweed and salt. It was far, but not far enough, and beneath it, just below the surface, I saw shapes, dozens of them, maybe more. They looked like they were wiggling. I ran back to the cabin, tried to warn them, tried to explain, but how do you tell your friends that the sea has grown teeth? That the tide is crawling toward you, hungry? Danny was the only one that believed me. Maybe he had seen something too. He grabbed the firewood and started stacking it at the door. "We burn it," he said. "Whatever comes up here tonight, we burn it." We made a wall of flame, set the beach on fire, built a line of logs and dry branches, and lit them all. The fire roared like it was screaming, throwing sparks into the air. And still, we all saw them, shapes in the water, coming closer. We stood in a line, backs to the flames, eyes locked onto the sea. And as the surf touched the firelight, we saw them crawl out. They weren't human. They weren't anything I have words for. Their bodies were stretched and glistening. Their skin was smooth and colorless, like things that had never seen the sun. No eyes, no mouths, just faces, smooth as bone, tilted toward us like they were listening. They didn't walk. They slithered, and every moment they made sounds like the tide turning over. But the fire held them back, barely. They started circling us and waiting. Then something called to them from out beyond the waves, a sound I didn't hear with my ears, but I felt it deep in my bones, in the back of my teeth. It felt like the ocean itself had spoken. And all at once, the things stopped moving. They turned in unison and slipped back into the surf. Gone. Just like that. By morning, the beach was empty. Josh never came back. Neither did Katie. She walked into the sea before dawn, silent and calm. We couldn't stop her. Sarah didn't even try. Danny left with me. We hiked for hours until we found a road, flagged down a truck, never told the driver why we were barefoot, or why our clothes smelled like salt and smoke. We both don't talk about what we saw. Sarah stayed behind. She said she had to watch the shore, that it wasn't over. I still dream about them. The things in the water, the tide with teeth. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear it again. That voice, calling and waiting. The ocean is never empty. They told me the last keeper left without a word. One morning, a passing ferry saw the light had gone dark, and when they sent someone up from the mainland, they found the place empty. The locks were still open on the desk, the teacup half full beside it. Nothing broken, nothing burned. He was just gone. I arrived 2 weeks later, under a grey sky and a bitter wind that blew sideways off the sea. The boat that brought me didn't linger. The man at the tiller gave me a nod and a glance that lasted a moment too long. Then he turned his vessel and slid back into the fog. I watched until even the wake had vanished, then looked up at the tower. It rose from the cliff like the spine of some long-dead beast, tall and pale and weather-stained, with rust seeping from its seams. Behind it stretched the keeper's cottage. It was stone-walled and roofed in weathered slate. A gull cried somewhere overhead, and the wind smelled like salt and iron. I unlocked the door with a key mailed weeks ago in a yellow envelope. The latch stuck until I put my shoulder into it, and the door gave way with a groan, like something being disturbed. The inside was dim and quiet. Dust floated in narrow beams of light, and everything was in order, at least more or less. The desk stood where it should, facing the window. The shelves were stocked with old manuals, lantern oil, and tools. A narrow bed leaned against the wall. It was made. I felt like someone had stripped the room of personality. The only thing left behind was a faded photograph, slipped under the blotter. A group of men standing outside the tower, staring into the camera. None of them smiled. I put my bag down and started the routine. That's what they tell you. Start the routine right away. The isolation's manageable if the hours have shape. Morning inspection, midday lens cleaning, night watch, and beacon maintenance. I started by walking the tower, touching cold railings, climbing the steps one by one, listening to the echo of my boots spiral upward. The higher I climbed, the more the wind found its voice, whispering through cracks and corners. And at the top, the lens waited. It was a beautiful thing, brass-rimmed and many-faceted, wrapped around the great eye of the beacon like a crown. The mechanism itself was intact. The flame would burn, so I lit it that night with a sense of ceremony, watching as it pulsed to life, casting long sweeping arcs across the sea. It turned in silence, and the room grew warm. The ocean beyond it remained still. There were no ships and no buoys, nothing but endless black. The days blurred, as they always do in places like this. Morning bled into dusk, dusk into dreams. I walked the grounds, climbed the cliffs, stood in the lens chamber and listened to the fire hum. I ate my meals in silence, wrote in the logbook, and did not speak aloud. Not once. There was no one to hear me. But slowly, a sense of familiarity settled over me. Not just with the place, but with the silence. It was not a lonely silence. It felt occupied, as though the walls had memory, as though the wind carried whispers not meant for me, but simply passing through. At night, I began to notice things. A faint scrape on the floorboards, as though a chair had shifted without cause. A draft that touched my neck, though no windows were open. And once, I even found the kettle warm in the morning, though I hadn't lit the stove. I told myself it was imagination, ritual-thinned nerves, the mind rebelling against monotony. But the feeling persisted. There was something beneath the quiet. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the clouds and the sea swallowed its light, I took my lantern and wandered. The tower loomed behind me, its beam turning slowly, slicing the mist. I walked the edge of the cliff, boots crunching against gravel, listening to the waves below. They didn't crash as they should have. They just leapt, gentle, rhythmic and patient. It felt less like the sea was reaching and more like it was waiting. I turned back and saw the tower again, its silhouette sharp against the darkening sky. The beam swung past, lighting the ground for a breath of a moment. And in that moment, I saw something near the base of the tower I hadn't seen before. An outline in the earth, a square, faintly traced, covered in moss and gravel. I returned with tools the next day and uncovered the trapdoor. It was old, made of heavy wood, reinforced with iron straps. The hinges were rusted nearly shut, and I had to use the crowbar to lift it. A slow groan filled the air as it opened, long and strained, like the tower itself was reluctant to give up its secret. And beneath the trapdoor, stairs spiraled into shadow. Damp air spilled upward, not foul, but kind of wrong, still like a breath held for too long. I stood over it for a long time, lantern in hand, listening. Then I closed the door, placed the crowbar beside it, and returned inside the tower. That night, I dreamed of waves retreating, not receding with tide, but pulled away by unseen force, revealing not sand or stone beneath, but something else. Stone, yes, but carved, rising, waiting. When I woke, I found myself already dressed, standing by the window, staring out to sea. The lens above still turned, and the light still burned, but I felt deep in the base of the tower, inside the walls, inside my spine, that something beneath had begun to stir. I didn't descend the hidden stairs right away. I would pass the trapdoor often, more often than necessary, if I'm honest, each time glancing at it as though it might open on its own. There was something about it, something that tugged at the edge of my thoughts, like a dream I couldn't quite remember. It didn't feel like a discovery. It felt like a memory resurfacing, as though the door had always been there, and I had only just remembered to look. Eventually, I stopped resisting. On a night when the wind died and the sea went still, I lit the lantern and pulled open the trapdoor. The hinges groaned in protest. The air that rose to me was not cold, not in the way stone cellars or forgotten basements are cold. It was warmer, thicker, damp with something that had no scent, only weight. The darkness below was dense, nearly tangible. I stood for a long time, staring into it, until I realized I wasn't afraid. I was calm, curious, like I was returning to a room I had once known. The stairs spiraled tightly, carved from the rock itself. I descended slowly, brushing the damp wall with one hand to steady myself. I tried to count the steps, but lost track early on. They repeated in a quiet rhythm, as though I were pacing out something ancient buried beneath the stone. The deeper I went, the more the lighthouse above began to feel unreal, distant, like a place I had only read about. When the stairs ended, I stepped into a wide chamber carved into the bedrock, and my lantern struggled against the dark. The space was neither natural nor recent. Though the stone was rough and uneven, the chamber bore marks of design, intentionality. Strange lines were carved along the curved walls, loops and circles that seemed to spiral toward a vanishing point behind the stone itself. In the center stood the basin. At first, I thought it was dry, but as I stepped closer, I saw the liquid within. Thick, black, and perfectly still. It didn't reflect my light. It didn't reflect anything at all. Around the basin, I noticed symbols carved into the floor, repeated images of an eye, a spiral, and a wave, etched again and again with small obsessive strokes. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear exactly, but a sense that I was being drawn into something far older than I could comprehend. The basin wasn't meant to be used. It was meant to be seen, or remembered. Along the far wall, half buried beneath a pile of crumbled stone, I found a journal bound in hide. The pages were damp, but the ink remained barely legible, written in an archaic hand that suggested multiple authors over many years. Some of it was written in languages I couldn't place, but others had been annotated, translated. There were references to the lighthouse, to flame, to a watcher beneath. One passage had been circled many times, the ink bleeding through the page. The sea was not made to cover it. The sea was made to keep us away. As I read further, A kind of quiet dread crept in. Not the kind that strikes you all at once, but something deeper. The kind that seeps into your bones and rearranges what you think of as truth. The journal didn't describe a creature in a way we think of them. Not with body or voice or hunger. It spoke of a presence, a weight beneath the world. Something that had once slept in lightless depths before the ocean itself was formed to bury it. There were no names, only symbols. Always the spiral, the eye, and the wave. The watcher did not move. It did not speak, but it listened, and it remembered. The final entry had been scrawled hastily, half a sentence fading into illegibility. It dreams in the rhythm of the beacon. The flame must never. The rest was lost to mold and time. I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence. And I realized then that the light above, the great rotating beacon, was not meant to protect. It wasn't a warning. It was a signal. Not to sailors, but to whatever lay beneath. Or perhaps it was even older than that. Perhaps the flame burned simply because it always had. Because to stop it would be to break something we no longer understood. In the days that followed, I returned to the chamber often. I didn't always go down the stairs. Sometimes I just stood at the trapdoor, listening. The walls of the lighthouse began to feel thinner, more brittle. I started to hear things in the stone. Whispering. No, more like breathing. It was deep and slow, like the tides. I would sit at my desk, journal open before me, and feel the tower pulse ever so slightly beneath my feet. As if the island was not anchored to the ocean floor, but floating on something alive. Then came the dreams. They weren't violent or even particularly frightening, just persistent. In them, I stood on the sea floor. The water pulled away as if by divine force. And all around me, colossal shapes rose from the mud. Pillars, archways, impossible machines. And at the center of it all, not a being, not a presence, something that bent the world around it, something that hadn't moved in eons, but would if it chose. In those dreams, I wasn't afraid, I was reverent. I began to forget what the lightkeeper's duties had once meant to me. The logbook went untouched, the maintenance schedule blurred. I couldn't even remember what day it was, or how many ships had passed. I would stand in the lens room and stare at the turning flame for hours, hearing nothing but the slow hum of the glass, watching as it swept across the sea, like a blind eye searching for memory. One night, as I watched, I felt it again, the hum, but deeper, not from the gears, not from the flame, but from below. It rose through the foundation of the tower, through the very stone, resonating in the walls. The sea outside was perfectly calm, and yet it felt like the ocean itself was listening. The dream that night was different. I saw the island, not as it is, but as it once was. Bare rock, no lighthouse, no ships, just a circle of standing stones, and a fire at their center. Figures stood around it, heads bowed, eyes closed. They chanted something low and rhythmic, and then, without sound, the sea rose, not from beyond the horizon, but from within the earth, swallowing the circle whole. It wasn't drowning them, it was covering the mouth. I woke before dawn, heart silent. I did not light the beacon that morning, and still it turned. And when the sun rose, it felt wrong, too bright, too loud, as though it was trespassing. And I think the lighthouse no longer needs me. Or perhaps it never did. Perhaps all this time I have only been watched, and the watcher is waking. The days no longer feel distinct. The schedule I once clung to like a lifeline has withered into habit, and even that has begun to decay. The logbook lies untouched. I cannot recall the last time I wrote in it. Each morning, I find myself already at the top of the tower, watching the beam pass through the mist like a pendulum. The flame no longer needs tending. It simply is, eternal, unwavering, burning with a steadiness that feels less like fuel and more like will. I don't even remember lighting it anymore. I have grown quieter too. At first, I used to speak aloud, to myself, to the empty room, to the gulls. Now I find my voice foreign. My thoughts seem to rise from elsewhere, not formed but received. They arrive fully shaped, as if whispered by a mouth close behind me. And though I hear nothing, I know deeply that I am no longer alone in this place. The door to the stairwell below the trapdoor remains unlocked now. I don't know when I stopped closing it. I visit the chamber often, though I never descend fully. I stand at its edge and peer into the dark where the basin waits. The black liquid never ripples, never reflects, but I feel it watching. Not me specifically, just watching, as though it remembers what eyes are supposed to do. More pages of the journal have flaked away with time, but I have gleaned enough. The lighthouse was never a warning. It was an anchor, a signal post, a relic not of guidance, but of restraint. A wound in the world, stitched shut by ritual and repetition. They build it above the chamber, not to light the way for ships, but to lull the thing below into slumber. The beam was its rhythm, the flame its tether. And now I fear that rhythm has changed. It began slowly, The beam started to linger just a second longer each pass. The gearwork, once so precise, hums with a note just slightly off. It's like hearing a heartbeat stutter, barely noticeable, but unmistakably wrong. I try to adjust the mechanism, but every time I open the casing, every time it appears in order, and still the change persists. Then the birds stopped coming. There were always gulls, always cormorants nesting in the cliffs, always something alive, clinging to the edge of the sea. But now, nothing. Not a call, not a shadow, not a wing in the air. Even the wind has grown still. Some nights I open the window just to confirm the silence isn't imagined. And every time I am met with stillness so deep it seems to press inward, like the sky itself is holding its breath. Last night I dreamt of the sea again, but it was no longer calm. It was gone, pulled back to a jagged horizon, revealing a scarred seabed littered with stone and bone. At its center, something vast had begun to rise. Not quickly, not violently. It emerged like memory, slow and certain, ancient and inevitable. Not a creature, not a god, but a concept given weight, a void shaped into form. There were no eyes, no limbs, only mass and intent. I stood on the cliffs, not as I am now, but as I was before I was born. I understood then that the flame above was not just light. It was a lock, and now it flickers. This morning I found a stone beside my bed, wet, covered in moss, the same kind I pried away from the trapdoor. I hadn't brought it there, and when I placed it outside, I found another waiting at the door when I returned. I don't know if it's a warning, a message, or an invitation. Perhaps it doesn't matter. I no longer feel the urge to leave. The mainland is distant, unreachable, not geographically but spiritually. I no longer belong to the rhythms of men. I belong to this place, as every keeper before me did, whether they knew it or not. I wonder how many of them saw what I have seen, how many heard the silence stretch and warp, how many dreamt of the sea pulling back to reveal what should never have been seen. The light still turns, but it slows. Each revolution draws a little more breath from the world. Tonight, I went below again. This time it did not stop at the stairs. The basin is deeper than it appears. When I reached into it, the surface did not resist. My hand disappeared without sensation. No cold, no warmth, only a gentle pull. I withdrew it dry, but in the darkness below, I heard a low groan rise from the stone, as though something ancient was turning in its sleep, or waking. I will go again tomorrow. Perhaps I will step in fully, not out of madness or fear, but because it wants me to. And because the flame above no longer burns for the world above. It burns for the one below. I am the last lightkeeper, and I was never meant to keep the light. I was meant to keep it company until it was ready to rise. My name is Eli, and I should have died a long time ago. Not because I wanted to, but because I deserved it. Some mistakes, some choices are so unforgivable that they follow you forever. The weight of them is something you can never escape. But somehow I'm still here, still breathing, still alive. At least for now. I wasn't always a prisoner. There was a time when I was just another face in a crowded world, trying to make sense of it all. I wasn't born in a high-rise apartment or a wealthy neighborhood. I was raised in a place most people only see on the news. A run-down part of the city where crime and poverty went hand in hand. My parents were absent for most of my life, each of them lost in their own vices, and I learned early to fend for myself. If you didn't survive, you just disappeared. When I was young, I thought I could escape it all. I had dreams, like anyone else. I wanted to make a life for myself, to get out of that hole and never look back. I thought education could be my ticket, a way out. But dreams and reality don't always mix well. And soon, the harsh truth of my environment caught up with me. School wasn't where I belonged. I didn't fit in with the other kids, and the few friends I had didn't last long. We were all just trying to survive, in one way or another. I ended up working odd jobs around the city. Nothing that would make me stand out. I wasn't a criminal. Not at first. I just did what I had to get by. But after some time, that wasn't enough. The world outside had a way of pushing you into places you didn't want to go. And my downward spiral began when I found myself involved with people who weren't as innocent as I was trying to be. People who didn't care about right or wrong. They just cared about power, about money, about control. It all started with a simple job. A job that seemed harmless at the time. It was supposed to be a simple delivery. No questions asked. No real danger. I should have walked away. I should have known better. But I didn't. I took the money and did what they asked, not realizing that it was part of something much larger than I could have ever imagined. The next thing I knew, I was caught up in a mess I couldn't undo. A mistake that spiraled out of control, one bad decision after another. The authorities didn't care about my reasons. They didn't care about my background, about my history. About the fact that I wasn't really one of them. All they cared about was that I was there, involved in something they couldn't ignore. And that's how I ended up where I am now. I was convicted, sentenced to death for many crimes. I had a choice, fight to the bitter end or face my fate. And I chose to accept it. I didn't see the point in fighting. I had no future, no hope, no redemption. Death would be a release, a way to escape the life I had ruined. But the government doesn't care about redemption. They don't care about your past. They only care about what you can do for them. And when they came to me with an offer, I knew I didn't have a choice. They said it was simple. They said it would be a one-time thing. They said I would have a chance to wipe my slate clean. Of course, they didn't tell me much, but they didn't need to. I was desperate. They offered me a way out, a mission that would take me far from here, a way to redeem myself, to be useful in a way I could never be from myself. And again, I should have said no. But when you've been rotting away in a death row cell for years, with nothing to look forward to except your own execution, you'll do anything to get out. The mission was to a distant planet, one that had been abandoned long ago, its colony lost to time. The details were vague. They said it was a retrieval mission, but it wasn't about finding answers. It was about getting rid of the past. They needed people, expendable people. People like me, who had nothing to lose. Again, they didn't tell me anything. Of course they didn't. They never do. They never tell you what you're really walking into. But the choice was clear. Go on the mission, retrieve what they needed, and in return, I'd be granted my freedom. A chance to start over. A chance to live. I should have known better, but I took the deal. And that's how I ended up here, sitting in a cramped cell aboard a transport ship, heading toward a mission that was meant to be my second chance. The ship was small, nothing compared to the sleek, polished vessels I had seen in documentaries. This was utilitarian, made for a job, not for comfort. The crew was small, just a few people. Most of them didn't even look at me. I just wasn't part of their world. They didn't know what I'd done, and I wasn't about to tell them. They had their own lives to worry about. But me, I had no life. I had nothing left. And as I sat there, waiting for the inevitable, I thought about my past, about the choices I had made, the people I had hurt. I thought about what I had lost, and what I still had left. And as the transport ship pulled away from the station, my future, or whatever was left of it, felt like it was fading into the distance. This mission, this strange, dangerous mission, was the last chance I would ever get. The air feels thin, even here in the iron lung. It's not because the oxygen levels are low, but because everything around me seems to press in on me. I've been stuck in this small, sealed environment for what feels like an eternity. I can't move freely. There's barely enough space to shift my legs or stretch my arms. I'm surrounded by cold metal walls and the constant steady hum of the machines. It's not much different from the cell I spent so many years in. The same suffocating sense of being trapped. But this time, I'm just further down. Much further down. The mission, they told me, was simple. A retrieval. Go to the colony's wreckage, bring whatever data we can find and come home. That's what they said. No complications. But I'm not naive enough to believe that. Nothing is ever as simple as they make it sound. I glanced at the control panel in front of me. It's all digital now. Everything controlled by buttons and screens. I'm no expert, but I know how to follow orders. I know how to make the numbers match, to keep everything running smoothly. I run the checks as I was instructed. Oxygen levels, power systems, pressure readings. every number falls within the acceptable range. Everything looks fine, at least on the surface. The hum of the life support systems is constant, a reminder of the isolation I feel. The mission's parameters are clear. They gave me the coordinates, a path to follow and instructions on what to do once I find the wreckage. And that's all I'm supposed to do. I'm not here to think, to question, to feel. I'm just here to work. Just here to do a job that has no room for doubt. I run the sonar check. The signal is weak. I wasn't expecting it to be strong, but it's still frustrating to see the faint blip on the screen. The colony was supposed to be here, buried beneath the water, but all I can see is dark nothingness. The faint echoes of the wreckage bounce back at me, but they tell me little. I've been following the same path for hours now, and it feels like I'm moving through an endless ocean, surrounded by an abyss that has no beginning and no end. I make the necessary adjustments. Depth control, navigation, everything still within the tolerances. Routine, no surprises. I glance at the clock, noting how much time has passed. The hours blur together, one after the other. A monotonous cycle of tasks that I have to complete. I keep telling myself that this is just part of the job, that this is what I signed up for. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. I am not here by choice. They didn't give me a chance to decide. They just sent me. I remind myself that this is my only chance, my only shot at redemption. The others, people I'll never meet, people who don't know me or care about me, are safe, watching from a distance. They don't have the burden I carry, the weight of a past that won't let go. For them, this is just another mission. But for me, it's everything. A life, a future, a chance to escape the prison I've been locked in for so long. But no one told me what I'd be walking into. No one told me how this would feel. I move my hands to the control panel, adjusting the depth slightly. The sonar pings again. Still weak, but clearer now. We are close. It's so faint, but I know we are getting closer. My heart rate picks up. It's not fear, at least I don't think so. But there's something unsettling about the silence. The deeper we go, the more isolated I feel. The colony's wreckage should be here, just ahead. I double-check the coordinates and everything matches. But the deeper I go, the harder it is to shake the feeling that I am not just exploring the wreckage of a lost colony. I'm exploring something else. Something darker. I pull up the life support readout again. Oxygen level steady. Pressure systems within range. I've done this so many times now that it feels automatic. The job is simple. Routine. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Not on a mission this simple. And yet... The sonar blips again. Faint, almost drowned out by the sound of the water around me. But I know it's there. The wreckage is nearby. I don't know what to expect when I find it. Data, equipment, abandoned buildings, maybe a body or two, if I'm unlucky. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to do a job, to retrieve the data they want and then leave. That's all. I glance around the cramped space. The walls are closing in on me, just like they always have. I've been living in this isolation for so long now that It almost feels normal. But I can't forget that I'm still a prisoner. Just a different kind. The machines here keep me alive, keep me functioning. But they don't free me. They don't let me go. They just keep me breathing, keep me moving forward. I adjust the navigation again, deeper, closer, and then I feel it. A shift, something in the water. A change, faint but unmistakable. The systems flicker for a moment, but I tell myself it's nothing, just the pressure of the ocean. But it lingers, the feeling. Something's not right. The sonar is faint but steady now. I can see the colony's remains on the radar, distant and eerie, like ghostly silhouettes drifting beneath the surface. The further we go, the deeper we sink, the more the darkness outside seems to press against the hull. I run my fingers over the console, my movements automatic, checking the power grid, the oxygen levels, the pressure systems. The numbers are stable, almost too stable. It's like everything's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I glance at the clock again. The hours have blurred together, and the silence inside the iron lung is growing heavier by the minute. The soft hum of the life support systems is constant, a reminder of just how alone I am in this tiny metal coffin. I remind myself that it's just a routine mission, just another job to tick off. But there's a sinking feeling in my gut, something that I can't quite shake. The power flickers. For a moment I don't think much of it. The lights dim briefly, then brighten again, and the hum of the systems falters before stabilizing. But I can't ignore it. I check the power grid once more, and everything's fine. I am not sure why it's bothering me, but the flicker doesn't feel right. I tap at the console, making sure everything is running smoothly. But then another alarm sounds. Low pressure. The warning light blinks on, a small red indicator on the screen. It's not a major issue, I tell myself. I'm deep underwater, and the pressure is bound to fluctuate. I check the pressure gauge, but it's steady. There's nothing to worry about. But the alarm keeps blaring. I pull up the diagnostics again, checking the system readings. The pressure is stable. The numbers match what they should be. So I reset the sensors. But the alarm continues. A high-pitched whine that gets under my skin. I can't ignore it. I glance outside through the small viewpoint. The ocean is dark, silent and unnervingly still. There's no movement, no sign of anything around me. Just the faint glow of the iron lung systems, casting a pale light in the pitch-black abyss. The warning lights finally stop blinking, but it leaves an unsettling taste in the back of my mouth. Everything seems to be functioning properly again, but I can't shake the nagging feeling that something isn't right. I check the sonar once more. The colony wreckage is closer now, its outline just below me. So I adjust the navigation, steering the iron lung closer. But then the comms go dead. I freeze. The comms panel is unresponsive. No signal, no static. Just silence. The flickering screen stares back at me, mocking my attempts to get a response. I tap at the buttons, frantically trying to reset the system. I'm not supposed to be here alone. The comms are my lifeline, a connection to the rest of the world, even if it's just a one-way channel. I try to breathe through the sudden tightness in my chest. The silence is more suffocating now. The comms aren't working. The alarms were going off earlier and the power... I don't know, it's all little things. All these small failures that shouldn't matter, but they're adding up. I force myself to focus. This isn't the time for panic. There's still work to be done. The sonar blips again, the faint signal of the wreckage just ahead. I am almost there. The mission has to be completed. I glance at the systems one more time. Oxygen levels normal, pressure holding steady. The power grid's back to normal. But the flicker of doubt is there now, gnawing at the edges of my mind. It wasn't supposed to be like this. This was supposed to be a routine mission. They gave me the coordinates, the data, and told me to retrieve this information. Simple. I adjust the depth and the angle, lowering us further down toward the wreckage. The sonar pings louder, and I can see the outlines of the colony through the water. The structures are twisted, broken like some forgotten monument to failure. But as I get closer, another flicker runs through the systems. This time, a complete shutdown of the power. The lights go out entirely. For a moment, I can't see anything. The darkness is absolute. The deep, overwhelming quiet of the ocean presses in on me, and I have to force myself not to panic. I hit the control panel again, tapping the emergency restart sequence, and after a few tense seconds, the systems come back to life. The lights flicker on again and the console displays the familiar readouts. The panic that had started to rise inside me dissipates slightly. But there's a tremor in my hands now. It's nothing, just another glitch. I've seen things like this before. So I run another system diagnostics, double-checking everything. The power grid is back to normal, the oxygen levels are stable, and the pressure is still holding. I breathe out slowly. But I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. The sonar is still steady. The wreckage is just ahead, but every part of me feels like it's being pulled into something darker. The deep, crushing weight of the water outside, the growing tension in my chest, the eerie stillness. It's like the ocean itself is waiting. I make my final descent toward the wreckage. The sonar pings louder now, as if it's calling to me. I tell myself that I've worked in worse conditions, in tighter spaces. This is nothing, just a job, just a mission. But deep down, I know it's more than that. And as the wreckage comes into view, a sense of dread washes over me. I can't explain it, it's just a feeling. But something is waiting for me out there, hidden in the darkness. And I'm getting closer. But I don't know what I'll find. The wreckage stretches before me like a graveyard swallowed by the abyss. Twisted metal beams, collapsed structures and shattered domes. The remains of what was once a thriving colony. Now, nothing more than debris scattered across the ocean floor. My sonar outlines the ruins in rough, flickering shapes. But beyond that there is only darkness. An endless, swallowing black that seems deeper than the ocean itself. I exhale slowly, my breath loud in the cramped interior of the iron lung. Every movement inside this metal coffin feels exaggerated. The shift of my fingers over the controls, the steady rise and fall of my chest, even the soft creak of my chair. There's no sound beyond that. Just the hum of the life support systems and the occasional sonar ping, sending out waves into the void. I force myself to focus. My mission is simple. Survey the wreckage, take the necessary scans and return. A simple, mindless task. But as I navigate through the remains of the colony, a strange unease creeps into my bones. There's just no movement outside. No shifting debris, no drifting sediment stirred by my presence. The ocean should feel alive in some way, even down here. Instead, it feels like I've entered a place untouched for centuries. Untouched, yet strangely aware of me. I shake off the thought and check my instruments again. Everything is still stable. The sonar pulses rhythmically, sending back an unchanging map of my surroundings. I adjust the sub's position slightly, angling the camera feed toward what looks like the remnants of a habitation module. Its walls are split open, the interior collapsed under the weight of the ocean. I take a few scans, log the data and move on. Then the lights flicker. Only for a moment, barely long enough to register, but I feel it. That split second of darkness where the hum of the system stutters, where everything inside the sub seems to contract, as if it's holding its breath. I tighten my grip on the controls. It's nothing, just a fluctuation in power. It happens. The lights stabilize again, and I try to ignore the way my pulse has quickened. So I continue the scan, move deeper into the wreckage. Then, bang! A dull, heavy thud against the hull. I freeze. The sound reverberates through the cabin, a deep metallic groan that lingers in the confined space. My heart pounds in my ears. I glance at the sonar, expecting to see something, anything, but there's nothing there. The wreckage is still, the ocean still silent. I force myself to breathe, my fingers hovering over the controls. Debris, I tell myself. A loose piece of the wreck shifting. That's all it was. I wait a few moments, straining to hear anything beyond my own breath. Nothing. Slowly I press forward. The sub moves cautiously through the ruins, my focus sharpening. I scan another section, more collapsed buildings, more twisted metal. The sonar pulses steadily, the echoes bouncing back like whispers in the dark. Then another sound. A tapping. Soft, rhythmic. Not the deep, accidental impact of shifting debris. Not the groan of the hull under pressure. This is different. Deliberate. I feel a chill creep up my spine. My fingers hover over the controls, hesitant. The sonar shows nothing unusual. No movement, no anomalies. But I know I heard it. I checked the external cameras, though I don't know what I expect to see. The screens show the same as before. Wreckage, darkness, nothing more. The light from the sub barely reaches beyond the immediate structures, swallowed quickly by the abyss. I swallow hard and keep moving. Then, something shifts at the edge of the sonar. A shape. Faint, almost indistinguishable from the wreckage. At first, I think it's just another collapsed structure. An odd formation of debris. But as I watch, it seems to linger, just beyond my perception. And then it's gone. I stare at the screen, my chest tight. My breath is shallow now, each inhale sharp and controlled. Was it just a false echo? A glitch in the system? The tapping returns. Louder this time. I immediately kill the lights, and the cabin plunges into absolute darkness. I sit still, my hands gripping the console so tightly my knuckles ache. My own breathing sounds deafening in the silence. But I listen. The tapping has stopped. Seconds pass. My entire body is tense, every muscle coiled. I stare at the sonar, waiting, expecting. And then, out of the darkness, a shadow moves across the viewpoint. My entire body seizes. It happens in less than a second, just long enough to register, just long enough for my brain to understand that something is there. Something massive. Then it's gone. I fumble for the controls, flicking the lights back on. The cabin is instantly illuminated again, the screens displaying the wreckage, the sonar back to its steady pulse. But my breathing is ragged now. My hands tremble slightly over the console. I check the sonar again. Nothing. No movement, but I saw it. I have to get out of here. I engage the thrusters, readying to ascend when, bang! A massive impact slams against the hull. The iron lung shudders violently, metal groaning, the pressure alarms flickering to life. And my stomach drops. I slam the controls, forcing the sub upward. The engines roar, thrusters firing at full capacity. The sonar begins to scream. Blips of movement, shapes shifting beneath me. And there's something rising. Another impact. The hull dents inward. I don't stop, I don't think. I push the sub higher, faster. My entire body screaming with the need to get away. The sonar is blaring now. Whatever was beneath me is following. And then the comms crackle to life. A voice, distorted, faint, whispering through the static. I don't recognize it. I barely breathe as it speaks. Just one sentence. You were never alone. I don't move. I barely breathe. The whisper still lingers in the stale air, curling through the cabin like a dying breath. You were never alone. My mind tries to reject it, to cast it off as interference, a hallucination, the result of too many hours in the steel coffin. But my body knows better. There is a deep primal part of me that recognizes the weight behind those words, that knows when it has been seen. I force my hands back onto the controls, willing my fingers to stop shaking. I push the thrusters forward, commanding the sub to rise. The hull groans in protest, its engines straining against the ocean's grip. Then the depth gauge flickers to life. 20 meters, 30. Each number is a step closer to the surface, closer to air, to escape. The sonar pings, and my breath catches. I glance at the screen, but there's nothing. Just the same empty blue, the same blurred outlines of the wreckage. But I don't trust the sonar anymore. Not after what I've seen. Not after what I felt. The lights flicker, a brief pause barely noticeable, but then they stutter again, dimming almost to nothing before weakly flaring back to life. The air in the cabin feels thicker, the walls closer. Then a sound, a deep muted thud reverberates through the hull. Not from the engines, not from the water. Something else. Something touching the sub. The lights flicker again. For a fraction of a second, the cabin is plunged into total darkness. And in that instant, I feel it. A shift in the air, a presence where there should be none. I stay still. My mind screams for me to run, to look, but I don't. I can't. A slow, suffocating silence spreads through the cabin. Then the sub tilts. The hull groans under a slow, deliberate pressure, and the depth gauge freezes. Then it drops. 30 meters, 25. I am sinking. No, I am being pulled. I push the thrusters to full power. The engines scream in protest, fighting against an unseen force. The sub trembles, metal straining under pressure. The sonar pings again. A new shape appears on the screen. It is massive. At first I think it's part of the wreckage, just another silhouette in the dark, but then it moves. Not drifting, not swimming, just closer. The sub tilts again. A slow, sickening shift. My stomach lurches. The controls feel useless in my hands. Nothing more than dead weight. Then the comms crackle again. Not static this time. Breathing. Shallow. Uneven. Inside the cabin. The lights flicker once more, and in the half second of darkness, I feel something behind me. Not touching, not moving, just waiting. I don't turn, I don't breathe. The emergency buoy. My hand moves on instinct, slamming against the release mechanism, but nothing happens. The sonar pulses again. The shape on the screen has vanished. My breath is ragged, uneven, my heartbeat a dull roar in my ears. And then the lights go out completely. Total darkness. The sub shudders. The walls feel closer, the air thicker. The darkness is not just around me, it is pressing in. Then the camera feed flickers to life. A brief glimpse through the viewpoint. And something is there. It is pressed against the glass, watching. Its form is impossible to understand, shifting in ways my mind cannot process. There are eyes, unfocused yet staring. A mouth, or something that wants to be a mouth. The image distorts. And then it is gone. The sub lurches violently. Metal screams. The walls bend. The air is forced from my lungs as the hull implodes, folding inward like paper. For a moment, there is only pressure. A slow, crushing embrace. Water rushes in, ice cold, filling my mouth, my lungs. I can't fight. I cannot scream. I simply sink. And then there is only the deep. Only the dark.